Chapter 1000. Why Bloody Massacre? The other burlesque I have referred to was my fine satire upon the financial expedients of cooking dividends, a thing which became shamefully frequent on the Pacific coast for a while. Once more, in my self-complacent simplicity, I felt that the time had arrived for me to rise up and be a reformer. I put this reformatory satire in the shape of a fearful massacre at Empire City. The San Francisco papers were making a great outcry about the iniquity of the Daney Silver Mining Company, whose directors had declared a cooked or false dividend for the purpose of increasing the value of their stock so that they could sell out at a comfortable figure and then scramble from under the tumbling concern. And while abusing the Daney, those papers did not forget to urge the public to get rid of all their silver stocks and invest in sound and safe San Francisco stocks, such as the Spring Valley Water Company, etc. But right at this unfortunate juncture, behold, the Spring Valley cooked a dividend too. And so, under the insidious mask of an invented, bloody massacre, I stole upon the public unawares with my scathing satire upon the dividend cooking system. In about half a column of imaginary human carnage, I told how a citizen had murdered his wife and 9 children, and then committed suicide. And I said slyly, at the bottom, that the sudden madness of which this melancholy massacre was the result had been brought about by his having allowed himself to be persuaded by the California papers to sell his sound and lucrative Nevada silver stocks and buy into Spring Valley just in time to get cooked along with that company's fancy dividend and sink every cent he had in the world. Ah, it was a deep, deep satire, and most ingeniously contrived, but I made the horrible details so carefully and conscientiously interesting that the public devoured them greedily, and wholly overlooked the following distinctly stated facts, to wit: the murderer was perfectly well known to every creature in the land as a bachelor, and consequently he could not murder his wife and 9 children. He murdered them in his splendid dress-stone mansion, just in the edge of the great pine forest between Empire City and Dutch Nicks, when even the very pickled oysters that came on our tables knew that there was not a dressed stone mansion in all Nevada territory. Also that, so far from there being a great pine forest between Empire City and Dutch Nicks, there wasn't a solitary tree within 15 miles of either place. And finally, it was patent and notorious that Empire City and Dutch Nicks were one and the same place, and contained only 6 houses anyhow, and consequently there could be no forest between them. And on top of all these absurdities, I stated that this diabolical murderer, after inflicting a wound upon himself that the reader ought to have seen would kill an elephant in the twinkling of an eye, jumped on his horse and rode 4 miles, waving his wife's reeking scalp in the air, and thus performing entered Carson City with tremendous eclat, and dropped dead in front of the chief saloon, the envy and admiration of all beholders. Well, in all my life, I never saw anything like the sensation that little satire created. It was the talk of the town. It was the talk of the territory. Most of the citizens dropped gently into it at breakfast, and they never finished their meal. There was something about those minutely faithful details that was a sufficing substitute for food. Few people that were able to read took food that morning. Dan and I, Dan was my repertorial associate, took our seats on either side of our customary table in the Eagle restaurant. And, as I unfolded the shred they used to call a napkin in that establishment, I saw at the next table 2 stalwart innocents with that sort of vegetable dandruff sprinkled about their clothing, which was the sign and evidence that they were in from the truckee with a load of hay. The one facing me had the morning paper folded to a long, narrow strip, and I knew, without any telling, that strip represented the column that contained my pleasant financial satire. From the way he was excitedly mumbling, I saw that the heedless son of a haymow was skipping with all his might, in order to get to the bloody details as quickly as possible. And so he was missing the guideboards I had set up to warn him that the whole thing was a fraud. Presently his eyes spread wide open, just as his jaws swung asunder to take in a potato approaching it on a fork. The potato halted, the face lit up redly, and the whole man was on fire with excitement. Then he broke into a disjointed checking off of the particulars, his potato cooling in midair meantime, and his mouth making a reach for it occasionally, but always bringing up suddenly against a new and still more direful performance of my hero. At last, he looked his stunned and rigid comrade impressively in the face, and said, with an expression of concentrated awe. Jim, he beguiled his baby, and he took the old Oman's scalp, cussed if I want any breakfast. And he laid his lingering potato reverently down, and he and his friend departed from the restaurant empty, but satisfied. He never got down to where the satire part of it began. Nobody ever did. They found the thrilling particulars sufficient. To drop in with a poor little moral at the fag end of such a gorgeous massacre was like following the expiring sun with a candle and hope to attract the world's attention to it. The idea that anybody could ever take my massacre for a genuine occurrence never once suggested itself to me, hedged about as it was by all those telltale absurdities and impossibilities concerning the great pine forest, the dressed stone mansion, etc. But I found out then, and never have forgotten since, that we never read the dull explanatory surroundings of marvelously exciting things when we have no occasion to suppose that some irresponsible scribbler is trying to defraud us. We skip all that and hasten to revel in the blood-curdling particulars and be happy.